You're watching Global Business America. We're continuing our coverage now of UK's referendum on EU membership. Polls are closed and the votes are being counted. The big question here, of course, will Britain remain in the EU or leave? Joining me now is Brian Beary, a Washington-based journalist and contributing editor to the European Affairs publication. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Asieh.
So, a couple of hours ago, it seemed like we had a sense where this vote was headed. It doesn't seem that certain anymore. What do you make of what we're seeing? At first, it seemed it was going in the Remain camp, and now it seems the Leave camp is slightly ahead.
What I'm seeing is a start, and the results are just trickling in, but from what I'm seeing is a stark difference between different parts of the United Kingdom. You're seeing strong Remain votes on the peripheral side. In Scotland, the Orkney Islands, Northern Ireland has one that's come in strongly Remain. Gibraltar, I believe 95% for Remain. But in the last 30 minutes or so, I've been looking at the English results, and some parts of England are coming in heavily for Leave. Now, it's worth noting the vast majority of the population of the UK lives in England. I have not seen any result from London yet, and you know, with the largest population centre, I would expect London to go a little more in favour of the Remain, and so that will be crucial to watch how London votes.
So what does a high turnout normally tell us? They're saying that the turnout was over 80%. Which camp does that seem to favour?
It's very difficult to say. It really just tells you that the British people were incredibly engaged in this process. Typically, in a general election, you will get 60 to 70% turnout. I hadn't even heard that figure until you mentioned it, but 80% is remarkable. But when you saw the high emotions in the past few weeks, it's not surprising. This is a question that really does determine the future of the UK, in fact, the future of Europe. And so that 80% are showing up at the polling booths, I think, is a good thing.
Financial markets do not like instability, and this vote has certainly created a lot of questions about what's going to happen. A lot of questions about the economy, Brian, with claims and counterclaims. The Leave camp saying Britain's economy would benefit from a Brexit. The Remain camp saying leaving EU would cause a financial disaster. Who are you supposed to believe here?
Well, it's worth noting that the business community is fairly almost unanimous in saying that the instability will be bad for both the global economy and for the UK. And there could be some gain in terms of flights of capital to certain countries in the EU. My own country, Ireland, for example, the financial services sector, some banks could move to Dublin, or Frankfurt has been mentioned. But I think it's clear that the period of great unsettlement that will follow any vote to leave is not going to be good for the global economy or for the UK economy.
What about immigration? It certainly has been a very divisive issue in this campaign. What do you make of that?
It is worth noting that Europe has had the largest influx of refugees since World War II. 1 million people arrived at its doorstep, and that, of course, that affected the flavour of the discussion. I think it shocked a lot of people how heated it became, and how a lot of the Leave side defended themselves and said, well, it's legitimate to talk about immigration. But I think the tone that was struck left a lot of people feeling quite upset.
Let me ask you about freedom of movement. If you are a British citizen and you work and live in other parts of European Union, how will leaving European Union affect you, and vice versa for people from other parts of EU who live in Britain?
The simple answer is we don't know, because no country has ever left the EU in its more than 60-year history. In the short term, there's a period of years where you negotiate the terms of your exit, but nobody's ever done that before. There's more than 1 million people British citizens living in other parts of the EU, and their rights to continue working, claiming benefits, claiming health services in other EU member states is entirely unknown because there are no rules. They would have to write those rules.
And finally, Brian, I have to ask you this. Britain is a country very much divided right now. How do you heal Britain? How do you unify this country once we know the results?
I think it's very difficult if the vote is a leave. For example, Scotland, there's a high chance Scotland will secede and become an independent country. And Northern Ireland will be very traumatized by it. I think it's a little bit easier to heal if there's a Remain vote. But either way, this has definitely shaken up the country and exposed some deep divisions between regions.
We'll leave it at that. Brian Beary, thank you so much.
Thanks.
For more information on the Brexit, including our own reporting and social media reaction, visit our website. It's at CCTV-America.com.